Welcome to design video number 2. This is Fluff, Setting and Style, and it's about the fluffier side of Feed. The story stuff at a glance, to the uninformed observer, it seems like Feed doesn't have this. It seems like a toolbox game. But actually, that's not quite true. It was important to me that it not just be, you're creative, so here's a game book with, some art and some ideas, and just do your own thing. Because it's not the sort of thing that I can use, that I'm interested in. Certainly, I like that kind of game. I like just, going and using your own creativity, but you don't really need a game book for that. What I wanted Feed to be is a meta tool for creating a campaign. I wanted it to give you ideas and structure that you wouldn't otherwise have had. And partly that is in the rule. It also applies to the creative process of the game. So in Feed, you create a story profile, which is sort of like a paragraph about what your game is, who the protagonists are, what they do in the sessions, all kinds of really important stuff for planning a campaign. And that's designed to be collaborative, so that the whole group kind of gets what they want and has sort of a series Bible, if you will. People love to be creative and have fun, and I think if you can harness that by creating a central little blurb about what we're all trying to achieve together, suddenly you'll see the collaboration at your table ramp up, even if you've got players who are often a little bit reticent. So Feed is not just a toolbox, it's kind of, it comes with plans. It gives you the tools, but it also gives you the plans to create something that the whole group is going to enjoy. There's also a question of, if I want to achieve a certain effect, exactly how do I do it? And that's where the stuff at the end of the book comes in. We've got some stuff about vampire literature. There's like a short reading list, and it's split into 4 different styles of vampire story. And for each one, it gives you some texts to look at, but it also gives you really specific ideas for like identifying the tropes in that type of vampire fiction and figuring out how they work specifically in role-playing. One of the weaknesses, I think, of GMing advice very often is that it either focuses on how to run an effective game, which is like a lot of table management kind of stuff, or it kind of focuses on literary tropes in a way that seems like it doesn't do a good job of connecting it to the medium specifically. And it's rare to find a game that really does a good job of linking those two things together. Even when it does, it's rarer still to find detailed analysis of how to fit that into the mechanics of the system. In Feed, I tried to bring all 3 of those elements together so that you can read, okay, in Dracula, because it's a classic kind of Victorian vampire story, it has trope A, trope B, and trope C. Here's how those work in a literary way, but then in terms of the table, here's what you can do as a role player to take what's achieved in a novel by Bram Stoker and achieve it at your table, because, the novelistic techniques don't work. It's a different medium. So you get that for classic vampire stories, you get it for like camp and schlock, if you want to do cheapy shock horror vampire stories, or like, 80s action movie, 60s Mexican vampire movie, which we'll get to. I have everything in there from Tales from the Crypt to Blackula. I've also got contemporary vampire literature. So if you want to go off in a more literary direction, but you want to get away from the classics and kind of experiment with it the way that like Anne Rice did, or Let the Right One In. Great vampire story. Very much in keeping with tradition, but at the same time has all these new ideas and compelling settings. It's not bound to the past. If you want to do something like that, something kind of literary, if you want to really deal with like themes through vampirism, which some of my sample strains do, then I talk about how to do that. There are certain translations that need to be made. Like, for example, the language that Anne Rice uses, beautiful language, that if as a GM you tried to use that language at the table, people would laugh at best. But more likely you simply wouldn't be understood because written language is so different from spoken language. So I talk about like how to get past that issue. And then finally I have a pop culture section where I talk about, if you want to do Buffy, if you want to do Castlevania, if you want to do True Blood, if you want to do Being Human. There's a whole bit there about like the sexy vampire trope, which of course sexuality in vampire stories is very like a broad thing that's old and goes with the whole subgenre all the way back to the beginning, right? I mean, Carmilla is a sexualized vampire. But the sexy vampire, right? Like the hair gel kind of, the sexy brooding vampire, that's more of a pop culture thing. And I talk about, how to do an NPC like that. So that's what Feed's got to help you create your own fluff. But there are also 4 developed strains in the book. Danse Macabre, super low fantasy. Like, you come back from the dead. That's basically the end of the supernatural element of Danse Macabre. They're vampires without fangs, without supernatural abilities. Their vampire traits are just like weird things that you develop when you have a life as an outsider. The vampires of Danse Macabre almost are like serial killers, in a sense. They're just human beings who have secret lives and can develop some very eccentric abilities and knowledges because they have to keep this secret and keep themselves fed. without any like magical or supernatural abilities. So, think of yourself, think of you as a human being. If you needed to kill someone tomorrow and drink their blood and then still be able to like make it to work and school and meet your family obligations and nobody ever finds the body, what the hell would you do? How would you work that out? And what if you had to do that every week? That's really what Danse Macabre is about. Another strain we've got that I love is called the Hush strain. And this is a strain of vampires who are basically demons who grant wishes. You make a wish and in exchange the demon inhabits your body. You get your wish, and then if you consume more blood, which happens, you will kind of let the demon take over. It takes over your physical form. If you feed it blood, then it will grant you more wishes. So there's that temptation. The reason it's called the Hush strain, is that if you ever tell anyone about the demon's existence, all your wishes vanish. All the things that you wished for go away. Hush is about temptation, isolation. Basically you found your magic genie, but it demands that you do terrible things and you can't explain why. It isolates you because you can't explain to people what's happening to your life. And the more you trade away for wealth or being well-liked or being happy or being powerful, the more now power and well-being and happiness you have that will all vanish if you try to ever do the right thing or communicate with the people around you. One of the playtests I ran used the Hush strain. It was great. We had some middle school kids who were all kind of like making their wishes that related to their family issues and like where they were in their lives, and then had to keep these wishes and these cravings away from their parents and away from their other friends, and gradually came to the realization that there were other things going on around them. It kind of had almost like a dark Goonies feel, I want to say. These kids dealing with very adult issues and sort of an adventure story, but also dealing with their isolation from their community, from their family, and the fact that sometimes really scary and terrible things happen to children, and one of the reasons that's scary is because you feel like you can't tell anyone. We've got Los Satanicos, of course. These are very traditional vampires. They're like the capey, turn into a bat kind of vampire. But specifically, they're like Mexican vampires from the 1960s Mexican B-movie kind of genre. Los Satanicos is great. It has freeform traits, like you just get the names of them, and then as a group you decide what they do. So you can have a trait like horrifying leer or I crave your beauty, and you just pull those off the list. Like there's no description, you just decide what those traits do and play. As well as some more specific ones, like they can create werewolves, for example. Los Satanicos, the point of that strain is to show that you can use feed for comedy in a way that totally matches the rules. Everything works just fine. If you want to play a goofy vampire story, feed is definitely there for you. And it's also in the flavor text for Los Satanicos that it's a kitchen sink setting. So they create werewolves, they can fight Frankensteins and Aztec mummies, they fight luchadors. So if all that stuff sounds fun to you, that kind of like, again, 1960s, let's have a wrestling match and a musical number in the middle of the action, Los Satanicos is the strain for that. And then finally, the most structured strain is Nod. This is a strain, basically this version of the Mark of Cain it's a mark on you that separates you from normal human beings. They won't really associate with you because you're set apart by being a killer. And if you kill someone who has the mark, you get it and you become a vampire. So it's really a strain that is very thematic. It's about violence, and it's about the way that violence happens in cycles. People may kill for good reasons or for bad reasons, but ultimately killing is killing, and when you do it, it changes you. So the Nod strain is really, it's partly designed for like a military game or for like any other situation where you've got people who would band together who are outsiders. They live in a violent world, so they band together, and this could be a military group, it could be a terrorist group, it could be a street gang, it could be a band of survivors. One of the story profiles is a group of women who are being transported as sex slaves, and they're involved in human trafficking. The people who are doing this to them are vampires. They're of the Nod strain. And one of the women realizes after she kills her captor that she's got his powers. She's got the abilities that they were using to keep the women under control. So she enlists the other women, and they all kill their captors, one by one, each woman gaining the power to then break free. And then they escape into the streets of Washington, D.C., and that's where the campaign begins. You all now are marked with the Mark of Cain. You're illegal, many of you don't speak the language, and you have this power. You now need blood. You now have great power over other people, and you have each other, and that's all you have. So it's a story profile, and it's a strain that can deal with the issue of violence from many different perspectives. So as I said, to the untrained eye, it looks like feed doesn't really have setting, it doesn't really have fluff, but actually we've got 4 developed strains that each come with story profiles, so you've got lots of possible campaigns to choose from. And more importantly, if you follow the instructions at the beginning of the book, you're going to create your own, and it's going to be something that maybe, especially in the collaborative process, maybe you wouldn't have come up with if you hadn't had this game book in front of you.